I have the privilege of introducing our next speaker, who is Justice Martin. And Justice Martin is our Senior Associate Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court. Justice Martin has over 20 years of judicial service, and previous to him serving on the Supreme Court, he also has service on the Court of Appeals and the Superior Court as well. And he has a lengthy resume prior to his judicial service, but to move things along, I'm making my introduction brief today, but I know you all know Justice Martin. But he is married to Kim, and they have 5 wonderful children, and just speaking with him earlier today, as things happen to all of us, everything fell on the same weekend for him, so he has several family things going on this weekend as well, and is still here with us today, so we appreciate that. And also, as you all know, too, Justice Martin is a candidate for Chief Justice. So you will definitely, I'm sure, be seeing him throughout the different counties across the state. So please join me in welcoming Justice Martin.
Good morning. Thank you for that wonderful welcome. I don't know about you, but probably the most unenviable task I can think of is speaking after Lieutenant Governor Dan Forrest. I have to really thank and commend him briefly. Lieutenant Governor Forrest not only has traveled the state in recent months, but he has spoken up for the judges everywhere that he's traveled. And I think that has not always taken place. And in addition to Lieutenant Governor Forrest, well, before I move on, please join me in thanking Lieutenant Governor Forrest for all the work. I have been doing this for a while, and really my first public service was during the Martin administration. I guess we should say in another generation at this point. And I will tell you that, and I've talked to other judicial candidates about this, we really feel appreciated, and we really want to say thank you for all you're doing at the county level to help us. And we know that did not happen by accident, and we really appreciate the leadership and all the organization that has gone into trying to highlight the judicial candidates. Now, in my brief remarks this morning, I want to encourage us a little bit, and then I want to get real practical about how the type of help that we would ask you to consider between now and November. My question for each of us this morning is, why are we here? I have a family member that's getting married in Atlanta today. I have a daughter graduating from high school this weekend. I know each of you have things that you could be back home doing. And I believe that at the end of the day, we are here to protect freedom. The founders of this nation looked around and they realized that throughout history, freedom was not the rule. Freedom was not what most people on this earth had experienced. And they looked back at the old world and they realized what had been the norm is unchecked and unbridled governmental power, arbitrary decisions by those in authority over the populations in the old world. And our founders realized that under the inspiration of God, they had to come up with a system that could try to check the arbitrary oppression that had occurred throughout most of the world's history. And you know the story well. They knew because of human nature that too much authority concentrated in one individual or even a small number of individuals would ultimately lead to loss of freedom over time. History had demonstrated that freedom could not be protected and preserved when too much governmental authority was given to one person or a small group. So what did they do? Based on the abuses of power in history, they realized that if you had the same group who made the rules, which we call laws, and you also gave that same person or small group of individuals the authority to carry out those laws, that you would have arbitrary government conduct, oppression of the people. In addition, they realized if you let the same individuals who made the laws and carried out the laws to also resolve all the disputes, you had the same problems. So we know the incredible miracle in Philadelphia. The founders said we will have one group who will make the laws. And we know government works well when lawmakers confine themselves to the lawmaking role, where they have robust debate, as our chair indicated this morning, and in the nature of a Republican form of government, a representative form of government, the ultimate outcome at the legislative level, everybody may not love, but they understand it's a product of compromise. Now, we have another branch, known as the executive branch, and this individual carries out those laws. And we know our executives, whether at the state level or the federal level, do best when they limit their activities to executing the laws and not trying to create new laws to compete with the legislative branch. And a few of you know what I'm talking about. So what about the judges? We know that judges are historically, we read in the Bible about how the number of disputes among the ancient Israelites had grown too many for one individual. And Moses set apart elders in the land to be judges and to resolve disputes. So when do judges do best? Well, judges do best when they uphold the Constitution, which protects freedoms, when they uphold the laws, and when they interpret the laws, not try to make laws. So, I know everyone knows these principles well, and now I want to encourage you. You know, I hear about without editorial comment as a judge, but when I hear about the recent so-called prisoner exchange, when I see a national debt that is a larger amount of debt than any civilization in the history of mankind, when I look around the country and I see dysfunctional aspects to how our government is operating at various levels, we live in challenging times. But do I need to remind you that the founders confronted the greatest military machine known in the world at that time, the British Army? Need I remind you of World War I, when our soldiers went over to a war that was not really our own and saved freedom in that generation? Need I remind you of a Great Depression where 1 out of 4 Americans was unemployed? Need I remind you of the Second World War when we had a madman in charge of Germany and his armies had occupied all of Europe, a substantial portion of North Africa, and all the way into the Soviet Union to the Ural Mountains? Need I remind you of the Civil War in this country, where families, members, in some instances, were against each other, and there was not an American family who was not touched by that war, and the incredible casualties of a war on our own soil? We have been blessed as a nation, abundant resources, oceans that protected us, incredible freedom that was born out of a desperation to make sure that people could have self-determination over their future, over how they raise their families, economic freedom to start a company, freedom politically to associate with other individuals and form political parties, and advance common beliefs, so that freedom can not only be enjoyed by us, but also by our children and by our grandchildren and those who would come after us. And I would submit that part of our duty in protecting freedom is to realize it's not just about us. It's about our children. It's about our grandchildren. It's about others in the community. And yes, it's about freedom in our world, because we know freedom, again, is not the norm. It is something special that is not free and must be protected. And we are here today because we believe in freedom, and we will give everything we have to protect it. Now, I'm going to take a sharp turn and be real practical now. I want every judge in the room to stand up. Now, I know Bob Hunter and Barbara Jackson and Bob Edmonds and every judge in this room, and I can tell you these individuals love freedom. And many of you know this. These are a talented group of individuals who can work at a private law firm and charge pretty high fees. But they want to serve us and serve the public because they believe in freedom. And they know that upholding the Constitution and the rights and responsibilities that are a part of that document will best ensure that we enjoy freedom. Now, as I think about the months we have between now and November, I realize time is short. And I want to share a little bit of statistical data to kind of share the tough burden that the statewide judicial candidates find themselves facing. In a 2009 U.S. poll of all U.S. adults, a sample size, 44% of U.S. adults could not name one branch of government. Now, math was never my strong point. Maybe that's why I went to law school. But I do know that 44% is almost one half. What a great civics challenge we have here. Only 21% of U.S. adults could name all three branches of government. And when I was reciting the three branches a few minutes ago, I could tell everybody here your eyes were glazing over at this time of the morning, because everybody here knows this information. Well, you are part of 21%. Now, in most of the statewide judicial elections, the current polling data, other than the Eric Levinson-Robin Hudson race, since TV resources were expended on that election in the primary, but in every other statewide judicial race, only about 20% of the voters know who either candidate is. 20%. So we have just a few months to educate voters. Now, if we fail in educating voters, what will happen? We will have voters going into polling places all across this state and voting for judges who they do not know. And in many instances, voting in elections where they do not know either candidate, that candidate's qualifications, fitness, integrity for judicial office. We cannot allow that to happen. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir because I know how hard everybody works in this room. And I know how much all of us collectively appreciate that hard work. But faced with these odds, what can we do to get the word out? Well, we know we have the ground war, and we know we have the air war. No judicial candidate is going to have the resources of our friend Tom Tillis. The Tillis-Hagan race, between the amount spent by the candidates themselves, and because it's one of the very few races that will determine the control of the U.S. Senate by the independent organizations, we know that literally tens of millions of dollars will be spent in that election. There will be no judicial election that has that type of resources. And perhaps I should remind us all about history. Other than Justice Paul Newby's race in 2012, in which $3 million was spent on TV, if you go back throughout state history, there's only one other judicial race up until the recent primaries, that makes two, in which more than $1 million was spent at any point in any election for a judicial election in the history of North Carolina. The only other example, other than the recent primary and the Paul Newby race, was the 2000 Chief Justice's race between I. Beverly Lake and Henry Fry. So there you have it. only 3 elections in state history to this point have involved more than $1 million for a statewide judicial candidate. Now, the statewide candidates have the same 100 counties. We have the same universe of 6.4 million voters. We have the same media markets that would characterize other statewide elections, but we simply do not have the resources. And that's why this group is so important. As the Lieutenant Governor said, email is not the answer. I think most of my communication challenges during the campaign year is because I relied too much on email, or perhaps someone else did. Let's make sure we're talking on the phone to confirm arrangements, because a lot of email does fly around. And we learned recently in sending an email to the state bar that about 20% of the attorneys were opening the email to read what I had to say. And so even within the legal profession, not many people open emails. So how can you help the judges? Well, first of all, to make sure that in your county, in your district, judges are prioritized. Now, I don't mean in disrespect of any other candidates, but I think everybody in this room would agree that for generations, judges were not even thought about. And they're thought about now more than ever. In 22 states, Supreme Court justices are elected by election. In another 16, there's a plan that's called the Missouri Plan, where a panel of citizens and lawyers make recommendations to a governor, and then the people of that jurisdiction get to say yes, no about whether the judge continues in office. The final 12 states are appointive systems, or a few oddities like South Carolina, where the legislature picks the judges. But the bottom line is, think about the responsibility we have here in North Carolina. We pick all 7 of our Supreme Court justices, all 15 of our Court of Appeals judges. We pick all 88 of our resident Superior Court judges, and we pick every single district judge by election. The only time the governor gets involved is when responsibility. And we know that these judges, whether we like it or not, will have the final say on virtually every issue in society. Now, if I've made that point well enough, I want to convey to you that whoever we elect to the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, and these other judgeships in November, except the district court, they will serve for 8-year terms. Now, that's a long time. Have you given much thought to what you'll be doing in the year 2022? That's a little farther down the road than the best long-term planning I've ever done. That's a long time, my friends. And so let's pull together and do all we can to elect the best people to judicial office in November. We are going to need help getting our signs out. Because the races are nonpartisan, we don't have an automatic ability just to call the chair and say, get our signs out. That really didn't happen even when the elections were partisan, just a resource issue. But it was easier when the elections were partisan to have kind of an automatic sign distribution process. That no longer takes place. And I know there are judges at the convention that want to talk to you about getting signs out. My own plan is to send out signs to the counties. In prior elections, I can tell you that in many instances the signs were put up. In other instances, I came after the election and saw the signs sitting there in a pile. And our plea to you with signs that cost $4, $5, and $6 a piece is that please put the signs out. If you don't have time personally to do it, please call around and try to get someone to put up the signs. Second, email. I know we can't rely on email for a lot of communications, but each of the candidates has a website. And a lot of us are putting downloadable flyers on that website. And if you will send email to not only individuals in your own county, but also friends and family anywhere across the state, that is tremendously helpful. And here's why. There's less information about the judges than any other type of candidate. And I'm talking about statewide judicial candidates. I think when you have a judge in Gaston County running as a local judge, that individual goes to church in that community. his or her children, maybe in the schools, and they have a lot better opportunity to be well known. And so the challenge for us is, other than outside of where we live, many times we are not well known in other communities around the state. And that's where we need your help. The one lesson that I've learned in doing this for 22 years is that you are my best emissary. People in the local community, because you know your neighbors and friends. And you know what? They will take your word for it. If you say, I know Mark Martin, or I know Bob Hunter, and I have seen how they've done in office, this is somebody we can trust with this type of authority, and I need you to support them. Your word will mean more than mine, because I'm just the judge from Apex that you've invited to your community. So by putting your own reputation on the line to stand for us, your friends and neighbors will support us. So helping us with signs, helping us with email, the downloadable flyers, we cannot be 100 places at once. I have been overwhelmed this year by just the generosity and the kindness of so many people inviting me to come to events across the state. And I know how tirelessly we've traveled, because we've traded notes, the candidates, about the schedules we've kept and how it has been difficult, because none of us are in our 20s. We're a little bit older than that now, and it has been a demanding schedule. But when we come to your county and we see the enthusiasm you have for us, when we see the way you are selflessly helping us, that makes it all worthwhile. Because again, we're here to protect freedom, to promote freedom. And finally, and this is the issue nobody ever wants to bring up, but we do need resources. The public funding program that was in place for a while is gone. Judges do not get a check from anyone other than when we give them money. And I will tell you, again, based upon my 22 years of experience, you know how it is for most individuals. They have an invitation there in the U.S. Senate race. Many years they might have a reception invite for a governor or lieutenant governor's event. There might be an invitation to a congressional event, a legislative event, and yes, we haven't even talked about sheriff, county commissioner, school board. And all of a sudden you come across the invitation to the statewide judicial candidate event. How do you think that's prioritized? Well, I'll put it this way. Most of the time we end up on the short end of the stick financially. And so we do need financial help. I do know this group gives so much to so many causes. The judges can accept PAC checks. We can accept local party checks, and we can accept checks from individuals. And so there's a lot of ways to help the candidates, and we need help every way you can think of. And why does it matter? I think I've already made the case, and I know everybody here agrees with it. The judges have a lot of authority. They are the final arbiters of the Constitution and the law that not only we will live by, but that is the rule of law that will guide our country as we hand it off to our children and grandchildren. What a great heritage we inherited. As I look around the room, I see people of several generations. What an incredible heritage we have in this country. May it not be said, when we had the power to rise up and protect freedom in our time, in our hour, that we shrunk back, but instead that we gave 110% to make sure that freedom remains the rule in the United States of America. Thank you very much, and God bless you.